listening to Finding Your Genius Zone with Dirk Nevelle. It's not just a job. It's not just a paycheck. Or at least it doesn't have to be. With the help of experts across industries, Dirk helps you find your passion and career, as well as exposing the unknown parts of every vocation. Let's go deep. Let's find your genius zone right now. Here's Dirk Nevelle.
Everybody, this is Dirk Nevelle. Welcome to my podcast. On with me is a very, very close friend of mine, Tim Braheem. And I'll be honest, a lot of where I am in my life today is because of Tim. Even the podcast, you're going to see him speak and see his backdrop. I've learned a lot from him in life. And I was thinking about what I would say in this podcast, but I think Tim is a great example for me of somebody that, if you have anybody in your life that you can turn to, just talk to, he's a guy that's really helped shape my direction in the last 10, 12 years. And I think it's really important to have someone like that in your life. And, Tim's done a lot of cool things in his life, things that I've watched and I'm just super impressed. But what I really want to start with, and I'm going to let Tim articulate it because he knows best, but talk a little bit about, Tim, what it is you do in your coaching practice. I know you have a lot of things you're doing, like your podcast, but maybe you could just, to the audience, give them an idea of what it is you do, the type of coaching you're doing, and, the group that I'm part of, how that came about.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And it's a mutually reciprocal relationship without question. You're a dear friend and somebody who I turn to often when I'm going through my own challenges, and I've always appreciated you being there for me. And I feel like this is like St. Patrick's Day, man. There's a lot of green going on your side of the screen over there. Your green flannel, your green logo behind you. Congratulations on the show, bro. It's an honor to be on your show. Coaching. Yeah, coaching is it's becoming more and more popular, right? I've been doing it for about 12 years now, 13 years, which is really surprising to me. It's one of my longest careers. I've had a few different careers in my life, and this one is in the next year or so is going to become the longest career that I've ever had. And I really enjoy doing it. I fell into it, Dirk. It wasn't something that I was actively thinking about. Maybe one of the things that we can discuss today as we help people put the puzzle pieces together of what direction to go in their career is how to really look for the clues that are available to them. And for me, it was, I was in the classroom at the University of Santa Monica in my second year of my master's degree program in spiritual psychology. And our professor, who was also your professor, Ron Holnick, posed a question to the audience, or to the classroom, not the audience, although it was like an audience because there was 250 people in the class. And it was a rhetorical question. He said, what is it that makes your heart sing? And I remember that moment, and I'll never forget it, because I remember sitting there thinking, wow, that's a really deep question. That's not what makes you happy. What makes your heart sing really, really resonated with me. And I said, gosh, because at the time, I guess I should mention, I wasn't working. I was retired and I was just a student in school full time. And I sat with that question for many months, and I landed with three answers. What makes my heart sing is I love to travel. Traveling and being in other cultures is a passion of mine, and it always has been and always will be. I love to teach. I consider myself to be a teacher. I've been teaching even when I was a mortgage professional as a loan originator. I think that's what gave me a competitive edge, was that I taught my clients about their financial decisions in a way that others weren't. And then I became a teacher to many loan originators in my second career, which was Loan Toolbox. And I knew that that's always been my calling, is to be a teacher, or to maybe more accurately to verbally articulate myself. I'm not a writer. I'm a speaker, if you will. That's where I'm at my best and what I enjoy the most. So whatever wisdom I have, it's better delivered in the spoken word rather than the written word when it comes from me. And then the third was, and this is the most profound one, is that I love to create experiences for people and exceed their expectations. And it could be a barbecue in my backyard, planning someone's birthday party, or doing an 8-day business and life planning retreat. So I said, wow, like that's 3 distinctively different things. I don't know exactly what I should do with all of that. And I owned this home in Costa Rica a different home that I own now, but in the same neighborhood. And I said, wow, like what if I did retreats? What if I created these radical experiences for people and helped transform their business acumen and their life perspective through, curating these experiences? So that's when I started to coach. I started coaching privately in a traditional sense, and you were one of my first clients, which was this one-on-one over the telephone thing, because we didn't have this medium of video conferencing at the time. I suppose we had Skype, but I mean, it would crash, 3-4 times in an hour, so it wasn't really worth much. And then I started doing these retreats, and I quickly realized that there was a great difference for me between doing the retreats and doing the one-on-one coaching. The retreats were just much more enjoyable for me. It allowed me to tap into my genius in a much more profound way. And it allowed for me to be creative, which is another thing that I have since identified. I didn't identify it then, but if I were to answer that question now, there would be a 4th thing on that list, is when my creativity is being allowed to have free reign and I can just dream about something that hasn't maybe been done or that I haven't seen done, and try to create that. So that's how I got into coaching, and that's what I still do. And one of the great things about it was it was at a time in my life when I was missing community. I didn't have a lot of friends. I'm very blessed to say that I have a ton of friends now, and you're one of them. And it's just so it's been a gift to me as well.
That was amazing. One of the things that I wanted to discuss with you, and this I think is a good time to do it, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, prior to USM, prior to becoming a coach, you were in my industry and you were one of the top producers in the country. Mm-hmm. And you really did it at a level that not many people did, which is ultimately how I found you. I was trying to up my game and I didn't know how. And fortunately, I had an introduction, and I think I met you in Las Vegas.
Yep. I remember we were at like a cocktail reception, somebody's suite, and had a cocktail together. And that's the first time we ever spoke.
Yeah. And I knew who you were. And the funny thing is, I'm kind of picky and selective. It took me forever to get married. Not that I don't have an amazing wife, but like I wasn't thinking I would like you as much as I did. Like I was a little bit judgmental, and I was skeptical, and I was thinking, this guy is a rock star in the mortgage industry. But I remember meeting you, and I'm just like, wow, this guy is like a guy that I could really trust and I feel safe with. And the thing, though, I guess what backing up a little bit, the thing that I wanted to get on is, so you were in this high pressure, high sales, doing a lot of volume, and then you decide to go to Italy for a year, and then you go to University of Santa Monica, which I did as well for just 1 year. It was a real 180. And again, I don't want to, if you don't think I'm correct in saying that, but like you really kind of went from vanilla to chocolate. Like it was very different. And part of this podcast is trying to get people to take inventory of how they're feeling and kind of what lights them up. What was the catalyst? I mean, that wasn't like you were going from mortgages to financial services. I mean, you went from, mortgage to like spiritual psychology. And I guess I want to get behind that a little bit. And what was the catalyst for that?
I don't know if I ever told you this before, but like back in the day, which was a long time ago now, like in the 90s, maybe some of your listeners, probably a lot of your listeners weren't even alive then. I used to go to all these mortgage conferences, to learn how to be better and then eventually I started to become a teacher at those conferences. And I fairly quickly was fortunate to insert myself in the group at those conferences of other teachers, people who are, really successful, and rub elbows with them. And we always have these like conversations over a meal or whatever about what book you're reading. And, everybody was like reading like Jack Welch's book and Good to Great and The E-Myth and all these books that were business related books, Never Eat Alone, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. I remember all those books being thrown out at me, and I always felt like a complete oddball, like somebody who didn't belong in those conversations, because they would say like, have you read this book? Have you read that book? What'd you think? I'd be like, I didn't read it. And they'd be like, well, what do you read? And I'm like, man, I just got done reading, The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra, or Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or The Power of Compassion by the Dalai Lama, or whatever. I was reading all these Eastern spiritual books, Eastern philosophy, asking myself a lot of the bigger questions. I went from being a Catholic born, to Catholic high school, raised Catholic. Then I became an atheist for a couple of years. That somewhat typical rejection of what was, placed upon you, to then realizing that's silly. I mean, I do think there's a higher power, and I just kind of became spiritual or agnostic, like really curious about all religions and all faiths and all philosophies. It was through that I really started to that always lit me up. And I think that this is an important question that you've asked for your listeners, because I never forgot about that. Like even when I started to become really successful and really busy, and then started my second company and was working 2 jobs, running 2 companies, and, not enough time to read the newspaper, much less read a book, and sneaking in a meditation here and there if I could. I always knew that was my interest. Like I never lost that interest. It's just that I didn't make it a priority to pursue it. And I strayed away from it and got very much into achievement. But whenever I'd have a vacation with my family and I'd buy a book to read, I'd always buy that kind of a book because I knew it was healthy for me. And I think that that's really an important footnote, because when I went through my divorce in my early 40s, after I had retired, I was in a moment of change, and some would call it crisis in my life. And I was searching for answers. And that's when Nicole Albini, who sent me the email to University of Santa Monica, and he said, hey, have you ever heard of this program? And I don't know if I ever told you this, but I didn't even go to an information evening to find out about the university and the curriculum. I just literally called them up and said, what do I need to do to apply? I knew in that moment, it called to me, and I listened. And I think that's a really important part of what we need to be talking about here, I suppose, is how to identify what's really calling to you, and to trust it and to pursue it, and to not second guess it, and to not talk yourself out of it, and to not get into that dialogue about, yeah, but I can't make money doing this, or, because those are where the opportunities for your life's path are missed, is when you don't listen to the inner voice that is wise and that really knows. And oftentimes, bro, I think that inner voice is speaking to us throughout our life, even in our adolescence. And life gets busy, the mind gets busy, and we forget about some of the things that are the breadcrumbs, the clues of where you need to be going. So I followed it. I was lucky enough to trust my intuition and follow it. And then, that evolved ultimately in having a coaching practice, which was never the intent.
So trying to think how to articulate this. As a lender, knowing the business, so often we're in our heads and we're trying to be productive, be successful. And what I've learned over the years, just through schooling and meditation and a lot of the stuff I've learned from you, is the real beauty and the real value comes when I can get out of my head and into my heart. And that's verbiage that you and I use often, which might sound a little odd to a 25, 24-year-old listening to this right now. But how difficult, because, we all have these voices and we all have these people in our lives that we feel like, okay, your dad wants you to be a doctor and your mom wants you to be a lawyer. And you just don't know what the hell you want to do. But you were in this industry at a very high level in your head often. And my guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know how much opportunity there was to be in your heart. And then now you're in this completely different industry, career, and I see you so often in your heart. How hard is it to kind of let go of being in your head when it served you so well for so many years? And I'm sure there's opportunities in your coaching practice to where you have to be in your head, but do you see where I'm going on this? Like, is it a really difficult thing to separate the two?
It is. It is. It's such a great question for today because I was journaling on this morning, actually, related to something different from work, relating to something else that's going on in my life where it's had me in my head. And I realized that that's just not the path that I want to be on ultimately. And it can be very difficult for me. I can get caught up still to this day and what I call falling asleep, like falling back into the old pattern of being, focused solely on conquering and achieving and having material success, and I do feel the difference. Like lately I've been extremely busy and I do feel the difference very much where I'm like, oh man, I'm moving too fast. I'm up in that head of mine on a really consistent basis right now. And I don't like the feeling. I think what happens is that when you think about it, we're all in our heart and not in our head when we're really young. I mean, that's what playfulness is. That's what joy is. That's what silliness is. Laughter, presence, all of that stuff that you had a lot of in your life when you were 5, 6 years old, unless you grew up in a home that was abusive or that was turbulent, which requires you to be in your head. You go into your head to plan, to keep yourself safe, to be strategic, and it serves you in business for sure. And I would never discount that. I mean, it's definitely a superpower of mine that I can go there. And yet at the same time, life isn't as enjoyable for me, at least, when I'm there all the time. So I have to build in some very clearly designed strategies, if you will, or requirements for me to check out of the head and get into my heart more. It's a process. It took me a long time. If you would have met me, 10 years before, you would have found me to be a very different person without question, much more intense, still have the ability to be that way. But living in that realm on a pretty consistent basis. I actually see it with Trey, my son, who, Trey is he's 24 years old. He's on his cultivating his career path right now. And he's a very naturally empathic, compassionate, heart-centered man. And it's one of the things that I love so much about him. And that's so beautiful. We had dinner last night. It's just really nice to connect with him for a couple hours without interruption. And I see him trying to build his career right now. And I see him spending more time in his head. And that's okay. It's just as long as we don't forget about that other aspect of ourselves that's still there and what really brings joy to our lives. Because at the end of the day, connecting with other people is the essence of what life is about, I think. I mean, it's not easy. It's practice, and you have to do things with intentionality to strike that balance.
So I'd like to go down this road a little bit longer, if that's okay with you. So
yeah, go anywhere you want.
These are words and these are conversations you and I have had for a while, and at 52, it took me a lot of years to kind of feel safe enough to kind of think this way. So I imagine if you're 24, 25, or maybe you're 35 and you're going through a career change and you like what you're hearing, but it sounds a little strange, in your heart, being in your loving. What are some examples of is there any advice that you can give to the audience in terms of maybe trying to examine that for themselves? You mentioned there's a couple of things that you do to kind of get into your heart. But, you and I have had many years of experience in schooling and meditation and, but for somebody in their 20s, they probably haven't. So how does somebody get in their heart to maybe get clear on maybe their life work or what they want to do in terms of a job? That might sound really weird or strange to somebody, but can you break it down in a simpler format?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's the application of both. I think that there are a lot of people that are in their heart almost 100% of the time and have a difficult time with financial success and building a career because they don't have that strategic thinking ability that's required in the Western world, at least, to find, material success. So I don't want to paint this picture that one's bad and the other one's good. They're both needed in an idealized sense. You have access to both and you can toggle between the two, but it's a practice. Regardless of which side you're leaning more heavily towards, it's a practice to spend time in the other realm, right? So, and for those that are in this process of trying to figure out their career and might be going, this is all great, but I need to get shit done, right? Like I need to have a business here that I need to run and I need to get my act together. My response is just be clear. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm saying, what if you combine the two? Like what would be available and accessible to you in terms of a career if you were to really be able to spend time in both realms on a pretty consistent basis? So to answer your question directly, I think it's different for everyone. I think that your childhood and your adolescent years and your late teens and early 20s provide you with clues. Okay. So for instance, when I was 8, I said, I'm a diehard Dodger fan. I've been a Dodger fan since I was a little boy. I said to my dad, I used to listen to games every night on the radio. And Vin Scully, for those that know who that is, he's the greatest sportscaster of all time. I was blessed to grow up with him. I mean, every night I would listen to him. I said to my dad one day, I said, hey Dad, I said, does Vin Scully get to go to the games for free? And he started laughing and he was like, does he get to go to the games for free? They pay him to be at the games. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. That right there, like at 8, I knew that's what I want to do. And I would practice. Like my dad and I would do these bogus interviews where I'd pretend that I was Howard Cosell. And I used to do these really good Howard Cosell imitations when I was 8, 9 years old, and we'd tape record them. I wish I still had those.
Let's hear it right now, Howard.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Howard Cosell speaking. It's the first time I've done that in a long time. I don't know if that sounded very good.
It sounds good.
And then throughout my teenage years, bro, I would practice. I'd close the sliding door to my parents' family room. I'd put on the UCLA football game on mute and I'd record into the tape recorder. And then when I got my driver's license, I would drive out to Dodger Stadium by myself and I'd sit out in the nosebleed seats and I'd bring the tape recorder and I'd listen to it on the way home. And when I went to high school, I knew that's what I'm going to be. And there was never a question. And then I went to school and I got it in college and I went to a good journalism school. And I majored in broadcast journalism and I was the play-by-play announcer for my college on the radio and all of that. And I'm not doing that now. Okay. But here's the thing is that I am doing it now. I'm just doing it in a different medium and in a different forum. Like I do a podcast. I do a lot of videos. I used to be a public speaker. I'm accessing those same talents and skills and passions and interests and desires that I had. I mean, I knew that I could think quickly on my feet and articulate and string words together very fast. I identified that as a gift and I practiced it at a very young age, way before I was ever even in high school. Post-college, when I tried to get into sports broadcasting and the economy was in a deep recession in 1990. And then I fell into the mortgage business. I still took those skills and used them to be a good orator and a good educator. I was able to teach people about their financial decisions and to put words together in a way to where it made sense to them. I'm still accessing those same capabilities. So my point is that if you're trying to figure out who you're going to be, what you're going to do. Sometimes if you're too locked into it, bro, you're in your head and you're trying to figure out this puzzle. Sometimes it really helps to take a few steps back and get some elevation from it. Get to about 50,000 feet and look at the landscape with a bit more of a curious lens about, so what are the things that light me up? What are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that have always come kind of naturally to me, easy to me? So if you're a naturally compassionate and present person, then maybe pursuing a career in coaching or psychotherapy or human resources, excuse me, could be something to parlay that into. If you're naturally, were always good in high school and middle school with numbers, like math was easy and you scored well on the SAT and all that. It's like maybe, and you love it. More importantly, that's the key thing. It's not just that you're good at it, but you love it. The two oftentimes correlate, but sometimes are different. Then maybe being a financial analyst or, an accountant or something like that is where you need to be. My point is just in closing is look back and ask yourself rhetorically the question from your heart, what shifts my energy in a positive way when I'm doing it? What makes me feel good inside? What lights me up, like I said before, and makes me really, it's like I gain energy when I'm engaged in it. That's your clue, not what your parents told you you should do, but what, I'm also naturally a very competitive person. Too competitive sometimes. Even still this day, I could be fiercely competitive. And I remember my dad, when I asked him if I could borrow money to start my first business, which was just my mortgage company, he was like really nervous for me because my dad was like, he's an employee his whole life. And he's like, oh, I really don't know if this is a good idea. And I think this is a big risk. And I remember feeling like, oh, okay, that's all I needed to hear to motivate me. I'm going to show my dad that I've got what it takes. If you know that you're a naturally competitive person, then how do you put yourself in a position to where that competitive spirit comes out in you and you can leverage it? So I'll stop there.
A lot of good stuff. There's a couple of things. One is I want to kind of talk about the competitiveness in the coaching curriculum or your coaching practice, where that comes out. But I also one of the things that, it's funny, there's so many people that we call it swipe and adapt. There's so many things I find myself saying that I learned from Tim and other people. So Tim coaches some of the best.
It's also known as thievery, by the way.
Yeah. And but I'm an honest thief. I don't mind. I'm not taking credit for it, but Tim coaches some of the best women and men in the mortgage industry. I'm part of this group. I'm taking a little break. But they are super uber talented. And they keep coming back because, Tim is obviously very skilled in the industry, but I think where your real genius zone, and by the way, the whole genius zone thing is another thing that Tim exposed me to through Gay Hendricks, who was one of his guests on his podcast. So, but you've done these people that keep coming back. They're not people, they're the best, they're the top. They're very talented. And I've been blessed just to be exposed to them. And, every one of them I learned something from. But one of the things that you would say a lot to us in our group meetings, and we would meet twice a year and we'd have monthly Zoom calls, et cetera, is, I'm going to butcher it like Tommy Boy here, but when you, the best version of yourself, like when people are like really attracted, like what do you do? How do you say that when you're your best version of yourself and people recognize that? It's typically you're coming from a place of doing something in your genius zone or something that lights your fire. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, there's a really cool little exercise that I would suggest everybody do, which is go to 5 people in your life. And if you want to make it 10, even better, and just simply ask them the question. You could email them or just ask them in person. Say, what is it that you see me do that when I come back from doing it, I'm a better version of myself. I'm a happier version of myself. You'll get a lot of great feedback. I remember asking that question to my kids, and my daughter Olivia said, whenever you go to your retreats, you come back, you're always happy for a couple of days. Okay, well, that's important feedback. Okay, so what is it about those retreats? You got to keep peeling the layers of the onion back, right? So if, identifying like what's the deeper aspect of what's happening at those retreats? Well, it's a lot of things: community, friendship, helping people, planning something that exceeds their expectations, surprising people, like all of those things are joyful for me. So as the listener, I would suggest that you go to 5 to 10 people in your life and ask them, this question, and then notate and start looking for, it's a puzzle. It's like somebody just threw a bunch of puzzle pieces onto a table. And then you have to put the puzzle together and really ponder it and contemplate, okay, what are the common denominators here? Yeah, what is it about when I do that I love? Because that could be a real big clue as to what you should be doing for a living.
I love it. So let's bounce back into the whole coaching career that you're deep in right now. And I know that it's not just a Tim thing. I mean, you have an exceptional group of people that you work with. And it's the recurring theme a lot on these podcasts is people are really happy based on who they're working with. And I think that's a big thing. Like, my advice is you may love a job, but if you're with the wrong boss or the wrong team or whatever, it might be a different experience. But Tim has he's always attracted great people, but he's got an exceptional group that he works with. But you knew what you're getting yourself into as a coach. You had an idea, you had a vision, but what are some of the things that have surprised you? Like if somebody's like thinking, this sounds really cool. And I've always wanted to coach. I want to be a life coach or a business coach. And that's what I'm going to do. Well, what have you learned that kind of threw you? Is there anything, not like a cautionary thing where you would push somebody away from entering this career field, but is there anything that surprised you, good or bad, that you might want to share with the audience?
First of all, I want to just corroborate something you said, which is I have an amazing team. Like I'm so lucky to work with, Scott and Julie and Sarah and Andrea and Doreen. I mean, they're unbelievable. And we've been together for a long time now. And that sure helps when you can put together a team of people that you have longevity with. It makes the business more successful. Ultimately, that longevity, it's a secret weapon.
And sorry to interrupt you, but also your crew in Costa Rica.
Well, yeah, Levy, and yes, absolutely. Well, Andrea for sure. And yeah, I mean, no question. I mean, we have, Gabriel, et cetera. I think that it's interesting because my wife, Liz, who she went and got a coaching certification in functional medicine. She's a nurse, and she was thinking that she'd like to be a coach. And she, did this class for a year and got her certification. And I think she would be a phenomenal coach because Liz is very present, heart-centered, good listener, possesses a lot of really wonderful natural skills that make a good coach. But I kept asking her when she was going through the certification, are they teaching you how to sell yourself? Are they teaching you how to promote yourself, how to get business? And the answer was always no. And I told her, that's going to be the challenge. That's going to be the thing that we need to really look at. And, here we are two years later, and she's decided not to pursue it because of that. And that's certainly no discredit to her. It's not her personality to sell herself. And so coaching there's two parts to it, right? There's being a good coach, and then there's the business part to it, which is how do you market yourself? How do you sell yourself? How do you price yourself? The challenging thing about coaching for some can be that it butts right up against the insecurity that one might have of themselves, and their like this question that can get asked, which is, what do I have to offer this person to be able to charge them for my time? So at the end of the day, in any type of sales situation, so if you're going into anything that requires you to sell anything, the key is for you to have the most knowledge and confidence and certainty in the product that you're selling. If that product happens to be you, then there's a real inside job that needs to happen, which is to have the confidence and certainty of your value to be able to present it to the world and to do it with confidence, which is required for them to say, yes, why would you want to coach with somebody who doesn't believe in themselves, right? And it was the same as a loan originator. I mean, I used to always say the hardest question that you will ever get asked is why you? That's the toughest question right there. And if you can't answer that, because it's a super delicate dance, because it's a setup, because you're being asked to display your confidence, not your arrogance, not your overconfidence, not your bragging of yourself. So it's a very delicate fine line of how do you present why you're good and worthy of that person's business without being too heavy-handed with patting yourself on the back. And that's the work right there. So that's what I would say. And that kind of extends beyond coaching, of course. That goes to a lot of different industries.
I'm tempted to ask, and I hope you don't get mad at me, but like if I was to ask you that question, why you as a coach, could you answer that question right now?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that I would always do when I was an originator and a coach is, and still would do, is deflect the answer to that question to my team. It's so much easier for me to sell my team and then to sell my background that I was blessed enough to experience. So it sounds something like, well, first of all, I'm really, really lucky that I have an amazing team of people around me that make me look good. I have two other coaches, Scott Bertone and Julie Wykes, who are wonderful at what they do. And between the three of us, we really care about our clients. We care about their well-being, and we care about making sure that what we are coaching them on is what they need, and that we're one step ahead of what they need. The second thing is I was really lucky to be introduced to a university many years ago called the University of Santa Monica. And I got a master's degree in spiritual psychology, and I learned so much about psychology and how to help people there. And then lastly is I'm just really fortunate to have had some success in business and to have, built and sold, 4 companies. And through that, I've developed a lot of business acumen. So I kind of bring that combination of those skills and my team to the equation, which makes us, makes my offering, I think, a little bit unique. But notice that I'm giving credit to others mostly throughout that, which is that fine line of humility, right? It's like, I don't want to cross that line and sound insecure or like I'm having to sell me, because that's always tough to do.
Yeah, no, that was great. I'm not an experienced coach like you, but one of the things I've learned is it's hard to I want to give advice, and I want to, and I've coached people, and often I'm trying to help them. So one of the things I think with coaching that's difficult is you might have a lot of wisdom and insight, but can you speak to the whole not shutting up and letting the client come to their own conclusion? I mean, there's probably many times, maybe with me even, you knew the answers and you could have said them, but you that defeats, I think, the point of coaching.
Yeah, I don't think that I mean, it's even debatable as to whether or not I'm really a coach at the end of the day, bro. I think that the difference is there's coaches and there's consultants and then there's teachers. I think I could be called all three of those. Not because I'm special, but because I actually toggle between the three all the time. There are times for sure where I will get off a coaching session and I'll be like, man, I talked too much. I gave too much advice. I mean, a truly skilled coach like Julie is, as an example, is someone who asks really intelligent, open-ended questions that help unlock the answers inside that person. That person's ability to discover the truth to their own answers is really a powerful moment. I do it sometimes. I do it effectively sometimes. And then there's times where, somebody comes in hot, they're in crisis, in a coaching session, they're struggling with something. I know what they need to be doing. I have some perspective to offer to them. And maybe I don't have enough time to ask enough questions, or maybe that's just my bullshit excuse. And maybe I'm just in a hurry myself, and I will just give them answers. And it's something that I'm constantly working on. I don't profess to be outstanding in that area.
Yeah. I've been with you for a long time, and I don't know how many people I would have let in, and you did the trick with me, because I don't think I'm the same guy I was, 12, 13 years ago. So I've
definitely seen a lot of change in a very beautiful way in you, bro.
Thank you. As we wind this down, one of the questions I want it to kind of be a free conversation, but I also want there to be some consistency. And one of the questions I'm asking all of my guests is, the non-negotiables your non-negotiables as far as a career, like they're different for everybody. I've heard people say they need to make an impact. I've heard freedom of time. I've heard no cap on compensation. There's just a lot of reasons, a lot of things people need in a career. For you as a coach or a business owner of a coaching practice, what are 2 or 3 of the non-negotiables that like you must have as far as your job?
Yeah. I suppose that's changed over time, right? Like the older that I've gotten, my non-negotiables have shifted. Also, it's impacted by your financial position. I mean, if you're in a pretty good financial position, you can afford to have a bit more liberal non-negotiables or different ones. So in my current state, it is freedom to travel. So I can't be locked into a rigid schedule that requires my time. Like, and that could mean like, I don't really look at days of the week from a work perspective. Like I'll work on a Sunday, no problem, because sometimes I don't work on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like I get to choose kind of, when I want to block some time out and say, like tomorrow morning I'm leaving for New York with Liz and the kids, and I'm going to be there for 5 days, and I'm not going to work when I'm there. And I'll make it up. I worked not very much yesterday, Sunday, but I did work a pretty full day Saturday in preparation for that. So having that flexibility, so I can travel and so I can make my own schedule is like fiercely important to me. I too, like whoever else shared this, realized a long time ago that I do not do well working for someone else. And I do not do well having a cap on or a ceiling on my capabilities. I used to my dad was a manager of a supermarket in Southern California. So my first job or my second job was I worked at a supermarket. It's the one that he worked at. And I didn't work with him, but I worked there for like 6 years. I worked my way up, and I was actually making more than all my friends in high school and into my early 20s. I was making some decent money. I mean, for a 21-year-old. But this goes back to the competitive part. So I used to try to figure out how to screw off as much as I possibly could and get away with it in that job. Like I was a vagrant, man. I'd be like supposed to be, stocking the produce, and I'd be in the back room listening to the Dodger game, and it just passing the time, and then I'd punch out, and I was lazy. And then as soon as I got into the mortgage business, which was the first business that I ever didn't have a salary or an hourly income, but didn't have a glass ceiling, it just brought out an entirely different aspect of my personality. It was amazing. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like this competitive and competition with myself came out, and I started to strategically think about how to get better and how I could grow and what could be. And it just really, lit a fire under me. And it's always been that way. Like I'm always better in that state. So a part of it is to know your own personality really well and to understand, are you that person? My wife, so Liz is very much the opposite. Like she's never been in a position that doesn't pay her an hourly rate as a nurse. And even when I've tried to encourage her to be to consider doing things that have a bit more entrepreneurial component to it, it actually really like paralyzes her. It's not her temperament. So knowing yourself and knowing what really does it for you is important. Try to think if there's any other non-negotiables in closing. Just the freedom of calendar and the freedom to control my own destiny income wise. Those two things.
Well, I would say also, I mean, I feel like you're changing lives. Not only are you helping people in the business world, but I think at the end of the day, you are helping people live more joyful lives in terms. I think that's the tribe that you attract. You have very successful professionals, but we don't just talk about work. We talk about a lot of inner work, and there's a lot of personal stuff that we go over. And I think, to me, my opinion is that's where your true genius is. And it's hard to hold a space where people feel safe enough to say the things we say, right? On our events and retreats. I mean, we have some pretty deep conversations, and Going back to our original topic when we first started about getting out of your head and your heart, a lot of people don't feel safe getting into your heart, but I think you create an environment that makes people feel very safe going there. And then I don't think that's easy to do. So
yeah, thank you. And I humbly agree. I think that's one of the things that we do really well. And I think it's really important. And I learned that in school, again, so I give credit to the University of Santa Monica for that for sure. Yeah, I do. You mentioned Gay Hendricks earlier in my podcast episode with him. One of the things that I had shared with him, and he kind of lit up when I said it, is I said, one of the most elegant experiences that I've ever had in my life is just when I get to be a witness to somebody getting free. Like, to me, that's like one of the most, it brings me to tears. It's one of the most beautiful things that I ever get to see is, and that is very much a part of my job. And I'm very grateful for it. Is when I say getting free, I mean like everything from dropping an old story, an old judgment about themselves to getting free from a belief that they're not capable of something in their career and that they can do something different and have success from it. That is truly a privilege to be able to watch that happen and to help facilitate that occurrence.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so a couple more and we'll wind this down. This is a question I ask, and sometimes it's a typical response, but if you could go back coming out of school, would you do anything different? And I know that's, some people take the road of, I learned what I learned and it got me to where I am today. But knowing what you know now about your temperament, your interests, and I know they evolve over time. You're a different person now than you were when you were 24, 25. But would you do it different? Would you go 180 and do something completely different?
Yeah, that's a tricky question because there is this side of me absolutely that feels like every single thing that I've done has led me to this exact moment. And I'm very grateful for where I am. And then there's this other part of me that's like, I wish I would have done this differently. And then I'm acutely aware of the fact that embedded within that can be some self-criticism and self-judgment that I want to steer clear of. Right. So, I would say that, yeah, if I could do it all over again, I would, stay on my personal development and spiritual development path in my 20s and 30s, because like the last half of my 20s and most of my 30s, I was out of balance. I wish I could pull back 10% of that, because I don't regret what I accomplished and how I've been able to provide for my family. And all of that, and all the amazing and wonderful experiences I've been able to have in my life. I'm so grateful and blessed. And at the same time, if I could shave 10% off that intensity towards achievement and allocate that to a little bit more connection and presence, because there have been times where I haven't felt like I was a really good friend. Like I made my work goals more important than being there for somebody that I wish I would have been there for. I can't get it back. I can only learn from it and try to, on a go forward basis, not forget that lesson. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Is there a dream job, like even one that you might not want to admit to your buddies at, around the fire drinking wine or something, like
porn?
Is there porn?
Yeah.
Is it? Well, I think Trey with his mustache has a better, I think that's a good look, by the way. But is there a dream job? Like, I mean, I have an idea, maybe what it might be, but like, what would be like heaven on earth for you?
I want to say that I'm doing it. It wouldn't be very far off from what I'm doing if it were something else.
Okay, let's just say you can't coach, you can't talk about spiritual curriculum.
Okay.
You can't do, God just says, sorry, Tim, that's off the table. You can't be mortgages. What is just something that's just crazy out of bounds that you're like, you go to bed at night and you put a smile on your face and something?
Well, I always have this wonder in the back of my mind of what it would have been like to actually be a sportscaster. I don't think I would trade, because I think that was a tough road for probably a decade of living in a lot of small towns and bouncing around and probably not having a family and all that. But damn, the NCAA championship game's on tonight, and sure as shit would be great to be sitting courtside doing the play-by-play for that. I mean, basketball was my best sport. I was very good at it because it's fast and I can think quick. So there is this part of me that sometimes wonders, what would it have been like if I would have been like working for CBS tonight and calling the game? That would be pretty cool.
Cool. So I remember I did a little research on your basketball skills, and like you had this, like you would close your eyes and do a hook shot from like the 3-point line. Was that your shot, your kind of thing?
I have no idea what you're talking about, man.
I'm kidding.
I don't think I did a hook shot in my life. I played through high school. I played varsity basketball in high school, but I was mostly a good ball handler and a good free throw shooter and played tough D. But
yeah, I'm kidding, but I was curious what your skills were, like your strength in hoops. Was it defense?
I just out hustled everybody. Like
yeah.
I wasn't really that talented, but I couldn't shoot the rock was my problem. I could go to my left really well, and I'm right-handed, so I could go both right or left. And I was fast. So, but yeah. I was not able to I didn't have hops and I couldn't really get up there. I think I averaged like 8 or 9 points a game in my senior year.
Cool, man. No, you're a great athlete. Him and I, like when I met Tim, he was more, he was my coach, but we've really become very close friends, and we have so many similarities in terms of our interests, in terms of movies, music, sports. It's really fun just because, we're doing the college tournament. It just ended, and I was part of it.
Congratulations on winning the pool.
Yeah, I never win those, so I feel pretty good. But anyways, I've really, Tim's range is really impressive. Like there's just nothing I don't think he does well. But I just wanted to say thanks, Tim, for being on. You've been a big part of my life. You've been a big part of many people's life. And when I think of success, I think you're living it right now. And I hope that you're proud of yourself. I know that you're a driver, but I hope there's moments where you take it in and you realize how much you've done for people, especially me. So
thank you for saying that, bro. I appreciate it very much. And I will take that in. It makes me feel really good.
Thank you very much for being on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.